Well, welcome everybody to another episode of I think this is our sixth podcast, I believe, of Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. And it's been a delight doing these podcasts. And I'm especially pleased today to have Michael Neill, my dear friend, and who wrote the foreword to the new book. There's Michael from California and soon to be London. I guess you'll be there soon.
Yeah.
And so Michael and I are just going to have a conversation today. Normally, the people who I've been interviewing, they're from a chapter in the book and telling their story of how this understanding of that we call the three principles is helping to transform their part of the world, whether it's chronic illness or working in jails, or we've had people talking about addiction. The next podcast will be about people are taking this into school systems around the world, developing curriculums. But today, we're going to talk in kind of a little bit more general rather than specific applications. Kind of a little bit grandiose in a way, Michael.
You brought me on for the grandiose one? Great.
Yeah, you're the grandiose guy. No, you're the big picture guy. And I was just listening to Michael's new TED Talk, How to Change the World, this morning, which is really powerful. And that really inspired me about today, and also ties into what we'll focus on today, which is how, all the things that were going on in this world. We're just talking to Michael from California. He's talking about the fires there at Lake Tahoe. Anne was saying that the hurricane is maybe heading the effects of it her way in Panama City from New Orleans, and the war in Afghanistan ended yesterday. Every day it's like what used to happen every now and then, once a month or once or twice a year. Every day is, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. And so the world is kind of going through a bit of a wake up call. And just this week, Michael and I, we were sitting around one night and we clicked on one of the great lectures, and it was about the changes in history from disease and epidemics. And it went back to the history of the Black Death and the bubonic plague, and all the way up to some of the current, not the current pandemic, but some of the other ones, SARS, and et cetera. And they talked about, it was really interesting that at the times of greatest challenge and greatest turmoil, usually preceded the biggest breakthroughs, like the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, and all of those. And I talk about that in the first chapter of this book, how we're in one of those times where life kind of forces you inward to reflect, to go back to the drawing board. And one of the, I don't think you used this quote, but Gandhi once said, be the change that you want to see in the world. And that's what we want to talk about today, is how do we, with this gigantic amount of turmoil in the world, how does one little person make a difference? How can we affect change for transformation? Because we're really needing a transformation, what I think is the transformation of the mind. The way that we understand the mind, the way that we understand how we are the creators of our unique individual experience is the next step we as humanity need to take. So we're no longer living at the effect of our circumstances. We'll begin to see how we can recreate a new reality. So with that, I want to introduce Michael Neill. He's a noted author. He runs Supercoach Academy. He's a sought after public speaker. He's has a radio. I think you still have your radio show on Hayes House Radio.
No, we've moved on. We've gone podcasting. So
podcasting. Okay.
Caffeine for the Soul podcast.
Oh, Caffeine for the Soul. Okay, great. So Michael is someone who I continually watch your own personal evolution. You are the student of all students. You're just amazing in how you continue to be open to seeing more and seeing new. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and how you'd like to address that question. How do we change the world? How does this understanding shed some light on what can often seem despairing and hopeless and overwhelming to so many people?
The thing that came to mind, the quote when you were sharing about how can one person, and I think it's Margaret Mead who said, anyone who doubts that one person can make a real difference has never spent a night alone in a tent with a mosquito. Right? That there is something about we both underestimate the impact that we have at an action level, but we massively underestimate, and it's easy to see why, but we massively underestimate the impact of our presence on the world. We think it's what we do that matters, and what we do can matter. Of course it can. But we don't realize that how we show up to life has an impact that is way beyond what it should. Like, it's way beyond what you would logic. And you can see it. You can see it with babies. The impact the presence of a baby has on any room, for good and bad, depending. But let's take the peaceful baby, right? Like you know, a baby at peace. You know, there's a famous experiment they did with they had a Hell's Angel walk around a supermarket, and everyone, observed how people reacted. And then the same Hell's Angel walked around the supermarket holding a baby.
Wow.
Everyone just was coming up to him and talking to him and treating him like a human. Right? That's, in a very small way, the impact of loving presence, of true presence. Not with intent, not as a manipulative thing. And there's something then that becomes the simplest way to begin to change the world is to show up to it differently. Now, what we do when we show up can also make a difference, but we're so focused on that bit. So I used to teach something called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And one of the data points in that teaching was an experiment that was originally done, I think, by a professor named Michael Argyle, and it was also done by Alfred Morabian at Stanford. And it was basically about when there's incongruent communication. So body language is saying one thing, tonality saying one thing, but the words are saying something different. Which message do people pick up? And what they found was that 93% of the impact of communication had nothing to do with the words. 7% was the words. And yet, in my field at the time, we were spending more than 50% of our time teaching people better language. So we're spending the bulk of our time on the least impactful bit. But again, it made sense because that's the easy bit to talk about. That's the easy bit to teach. That's the easy bit to share. So of course we focus on what can I do, because that's the easy bit to see. But it's by far the smallest bit of the impact.
Michael, that reminds me of when I first met Sydney Banks, our mentor for many, many years. I had no idea what he was saying. I couldn't comprehend his words. It couldn't register with anything I was familiar with. But he touched my heart in such a deep way that I felt the way I felt when I came into the world as that young baby, minus all the conditioning. I began to feel, it was like I was impacted by his feeling, his presence, his state of mind. And it took a long time for the words to catch up to that. But that was the essence. And that's the essence, I think, of what we all do as we show up in life, whether it's in our marriage, if we're a helping professional, a police officer, a teacher, whatever our role might be. people, I think you're absolutely right, Michael, that people remember how that person felt kind or was present with you,
Yeah.
or distracted, or
Oh yeah, no,
had an undertone, spoke sweetly, but didn't have the love.
the Sid thing. My son, when he was in university, traveled, did a semester abroad in Senegal, and he studied French and he learned a bit of Wolof, which is the other language there, and he brought a few Sid Banks recordings with him that he'd asked me stuff to listen to while he was traveling. And he reached out to me at one point after he'd been there for a couple of months, and he said, "Hey, some of my buddies that I met locally and I are going on a cross-country trip. Could you send more Sid Banks recordings? The guys and I love to listen to him at night." And I said, "Do they speak English?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, but how do they understand Sid?" And he said, "Dad, I don't understand Sid. We just like listening to him." And I think that really speaks to, at any age, at any level, you can sense presence, you can feel it, you feel the aliveness of it, the kindness of it, the power of it, and it's an invisible impact, but it isn't once you start to notice it. It actually becomes. I always think that the learning curve. You talked about me as a great student, and part of whatever expertise I have at learning comes from knowing the journey. And it's from invisible to subtle to obvious. So when we first start learning about something, we don't even see it. We don't know what people are talking about. And then we begin to notice it a little, but it's like trying to tell the difference between two blades of grass. But when you stay with it, at some point, it's like trying to tell the difference between a blade of grass and a lawnmower. It is obvious. And that's when it becomes obvious, that's when you've got it. And then you look at something else that you can't quite see, and it's less daunting because it's like, oh, I know it's going to be invisible till it's subtle, and I know it's going to be subtle till it's obvious. And that just makes it easier to stay in it when you don't really know what's going on, but you sense you're onto something.
In our last podcast, Michael, we had people from the Modelo Project and also from the Bronx talking about how the principles going into high-risk neighborhoods in New York City, where the crack epidemic was at its peak, or in Modelo, where the crime rate and poverty was just off the charts. And they, because everybody wanted to know, well, what did you do? What did you do to bring about this miraculous change? Because there was a huge transformation in both communities. The crime rate went down, the truancy went down, there were all these statistical changes. But what was the essence of it? And they said, when we went in, we treated them as equals. We saw that they had the answers that they needed, and all we had to do was listen to them. That was the first thing, is to listen to them and to respect their innate wisdom and intelligence. And that developed a rapport, a trust. And from there, they began to see how to transform their own community. And they were teaching them the principles and how the mind worked and all that, but they couldn't pass on. You can't pass on what you don't have. You have to catch the ball before you run with it, and that's the heart, really, of I think what you said in your TED Talk, and I think what Sid's message was all about, and certainly what this book is about. That first we have to really catch this for ourselves in our own lives and our own enjoyment of life before we can, because that's what we're really passing on. That it's the feeling of it that's really awakens in the other person their own aliveness. I love that story of the Zen master you told. Could you tell that?
The tea ceremony.
Yeah, where he was talking about how you were talking about how does he pass on that Transmission?
Oh, yeah, no, that was
Question
actually,
about
okay,
the
that was, sorry.
transmission.
Whenever somebody says Zen story, I think ancient parable. This was actually me, him, and another guy in a restaurant in Salt Lake City. But, so his name was Genpo Roshi, and he is a quite respected lineage holder of a couple of Zen lineages, but he born in America. And when I first met him, he looked exactly like I would have cast an American Zen master, in that he showed up on a Harley, black muscle shirt, leathers to lunch, and then took us back to the temple where there were floor to ceiling portraits of him in monk's robes. And it was just this perfect, bizarre contrast. And I being a curious sort, at some point over lunch, couldn't help but say, hey, how does this whole transmission thing work? And the idea that I understood from Zen is that the Dharma, or the truth, or Buddha nature, is transmitted from the master to the student. So enlightenment is an act of transmission, not learning. And I was like, how do you do that? And he the way he described it, and these are my words, not his, but this is how I heard him, was he said, there is something awake in me. There is something alive in me that I am awake to, that is asleep in most people, or most people are asleep to. And when they spend time with me, it often wakes up a bit. And that's that sort of first glimpse of a different possibility for how we show up in the world. These are my words again. And he said, and over time, and in his tradition, meditation is a practice is a big part of it, but over time, through presence and practice, what is awake in me is awake in them more of the time. And sometimes, by grace, what is fully awake in me fully awakens in them. And transmission is said to have taken place, although at no point did anything pass from me to them. And that, for me, has become my model for sharing and teaching. Is it isn't really something we can give people or put into people, or that they can learn, but it's something that's already there and gets easier and easier to sense and feel and rest in and live from over time. And so sometimes some people just, as happened to me, I heard Sid say one thing and my entire experience of life changed. So I was kind of listening to him out of, it's not a grudge, but like, it was my homework. I was working with Dr. Keith Blevins, and he asked me to watch it, and I was like, fine, I'll watch it. I wasn't interested. There was a baseball game on, and I was in my hotel room having a beer and wanted to watch the game, but I promised him I'd watch it. So I put it on, and I'm half watching. And at some point, he just said, every human being is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. And whatever that thing is woke up in me. And I actually snorted beer out of my nose. It wasn't pretty, but I laughed for about 10 minutes because I had spent my whole life as a depressed, suicidal, and then overcoming depression and suicidal ideation person. Right. So it's so I'd gone through the worst of it and then still carried it with me, but had learned to deal with it very well. I was what I considered myself to be an extremely high functioning depressive. And in that moment, I just saw, oh no, I'm not. The actual thought that I remember coming into my head was, I didn't need therapy as a baby. And I just got it. And, I can say that sentence to 1,000 people and it won't have the impact on them that it had on me. But sometimes that same feeling that came up in me comes up in them. And that's sort of the game of being an awakener is how do you wake somebody up when they don't know that they're asleep? And you can do it nice, or you can do it by dumping a bucket of ice water on their head. And sometimes even that won't work. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about sharing and learning than traditional, where if I work really hard and apply myself, I will get better at it.
No. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, when I'm going to give a presentation or talk to a group, or it's always walking into the unknown, right? You never know who's going to show up. Like today, you never know. I never really know what I'm going to say. You know, I might have a flood of thoughts in the middle of the night, come this example, that example, things will kind of pass through my mind, but I don't try to hang on to them. Because I know now, and I didn't used to know, it used to be, I was a phobic about public speaking. I would be sick for days ahead of time before I had to give a talk. I'd be so anxious and nervous and rehearsing and planning and strategizing and overhead notes and all of that. But with my own awakening, I know I'm enough. I'm enough. Everything that I've ever realized in my life will come out just exactly how it needs to come out with this group. And taking that kind of self-consciousness about being a teacher, being a counselor, whatever your role, you are here today might be, when that falls away and you're just in service, you're just loving people and being just really showing up as yourself, not trying to be anything or do anything, but just that intention of wanting to help alleviate the suffering in the world. That's worth a lot. You add to that an understanding of the mind, like you said also on your tape, that it's an inside out experience. You know, life isn't coming at us, it's coming from us. We're experiencing our own thoughts and interpretations and perceptions. So it's an inside job. And I didn't know that most of my life, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I thought we were a product of all this past experience and conditioning and family history and trauma and etc. And I didn't see that my own thinking in the moment until after I heard said that first time, stressing out the next week, feeling late for work, worrying about my clients. And then at that moment, it just, the light bulb went off, and I could see it wasn't coming from what I was thinking about. My stress was coming from my thinking about what I was thinking about. And that, it was like dropping into that Zen feeling. I felt my body completely relax. My whole perception of the traffic and everything changed. And I thought, that's what he's talking about. That's what Sid meant. And I just got a toenail of the elephant. I saw the toenail of 1 foot of the elephant, and that was enough to change my life.
Well, one of the places where I first saw my first TED Talk was called "Why Aren't We Awesomer?" And I kind of share some of the experiences that kind of were taking me in this direction before I knew this was a direction. But I went on a television show called "Put It to the Test" in England. And the show was, you know, took popular theories and put them to the test. And so the segment before mine was, they wanted to see if a car could really stop on a dime. So they got a stunt driver and a dime, and they raced the thing, and he stopped on a dime. It's very cool. So my segment was putting the NLP phobia cure to the test. So that was one of the things we used to do, was phobia cure. So they brought in 3 people who were spider phobic. And the idea was they had a doctor who hooked them up to EKG and EEG machines. And, you know, so the idea was they were going to bring in the tarantulas, show everybody freaking out, have me work with them, bring the tarantulas back in, hook them back up to the machines, and see what happened. Now, what happened was they were holding tarantulas in their hands and were fine. But that was like, I knew it worked. I had done it before. What freaked me out and kind of woke me up was in the dress rehearsal. The stage manager came up, everybody was hooked up to their machines, and the stage manager came in with a clear plastic box, an empty, clear plastic box, and said, during the show, there will be tarantulas in this box. and all the machines went crazy. Everybody was spiking. And I just went, holy cow, there are no spiders in this. It's all in their heads. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you're not afraid of what you think you're afraid of. You're afraid of what you think. And so I could, even though I didn't know that it was part of this larger way the mind worked, it was really apparent to me in that moment. Oh yeah, this is not about spiders. And over time, I've come to see that we are so good at scaring ourselves and blaming it on stuff. It's that David Bohm quote that I love, the physicist who said, "Thought creates our world," and then says, "I didn't do it." And there's something kind of liberating when you start to recognize, oh my gosh, it is my experience is all thought. And so this, how do we make a difference in the world? Well, it starts by separating it out, this world that I'm creating and living inside of, from the shared physical reality that we're also in. Because it gets really confusing if I don't know when I'm in the movie and when I'm not. And so I can fight monsters in my head without making a damn difference to the rest of the world. Or I can make a difference in the world and it may or may not make a damn difference to the monsters in my head. And when I start to understand that for myself, I can navigate it much more easily. And instead of tilting at windmills, I can tilt at things that will make a difference if I actually succeed.
Beautiful. So, Michael, can you share a little bit about how you're changing the world? What's the nature of what you do? How have you seen? Because you're all over the world. You're training coaches everywhere. You're involved in a lot of businesses. And can you talk a little bit about your work and just give folks here a sense of who you are?
Yeah, I think I set the bar much lower than changing the world sounds to me, right? I would love it if a side effect of what I do, and I kind of expect as a side effect of what I do, if you have thousands of people all over the world, often in kind of important positions, running companies or running whatever else they might be running, who wake up to this inside them, who stop taking all of their neurotic thoughts so seriously, as if they really have to be dealt with, because I think it's something I have to deal with when it isn't. If the world's got to get better, right? If you have a lot less scared, angry people running around, they're going to get on better. They're going to be smarter. They're going to make better decisions. If people see that they don't need as much as they think they need, that they actually have enough. Well, when you feel like you have enough, generosity is natural. It's not an effort. It's not a good people do this. Hey, I got plenty here. Why wouldn't I share? But that feeling of enough is nothing to do with what you've actually got. There's a beautiful story I love Kurt Vonnegut tells, the author, that he and Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22, were invited to this party thrown by millionaires on Fire Island in New York. And it was one of these grand Gatsby-esque parties with circus animals and giraffes and elephants walking around. And Kurt Vonnegut says to Joseph Heller, does it bother you that no matter how many books we sell, and these are, two of the best-selling authors of the 20th century, like, does it ever bother you that no matter how many books we sell, we will never have a fraction of the money these people have? And Joseph Heller said, no, because we've got something they don't have. And Kurt Vonnegut said, what's that? He said, enough. We have enough. And so that's how it makes sense to me that the world will change through what I do. What I actually do is just help people be at their best and do less damage when they're not. Like, it's much less grand. You know, if I can get somebody out of their own way more of the time, if I can get somebody so that it becomes obvious to them when their brain is leading them astray and when wisdom is coming through, so that they can follow the better angels of their nature and not the, you know, quirky little demons in the mind, then it's amazing how much better things get quickly. And so in a way, my goal with my clients is just to help them have a nicer life. And I know that there is a knock-on effect on that. So I'm not a crusader for a particular cause. If one comes along that I feel like crusading about, maybe I will. But it seems to me like the best bet for changing the world is being more awake more of the time myself. And then helping people have a nicer life just seems like a nice thing to do in the meantime. Mm-hmm. You know, might help, can't hurt.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Michael, how would you feel about introducing the rest of the group to ask questions? Or
sure, yeah, let's do it.
Because I'd love to just have a conversation with all of us. So what you can do if you want to make a, is that all right with you? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So down in your little thing where it says chat, I believe, you go down there, there's one of the options. Where's the
it's actually in
oh, it's in reactions.
Yeah, there's a reactions button, and you can just hit the raised hand feature.
Yeah, raise hand. So now I can't see.
Just wave.
Second page, just Nikon has a question or comment.
I have a comment about Michael changing the world, and I have a question. So, like, I think this week on Saturday, I had a chance to work with Miss Thailand Universe, and my job was to help her with her content about speaking about mental health. And what originally she came with was the traditional personal empowerment, and I was like, huh. Well, I guess God put me here in a reason. Well, this is what I've learned from Supercoach Academy, and she was like, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I'm going to say. And we kind of mixed and matched it with her stories. And then the next thing I knew, she was on camera saying these things. And I sat there kind of watching this thing happen. I'm like, huh, oh yeah, that's what Michael is talking about. Like, I'm the vehicle for this message to go to where it wants to be, to this very influential person who then says it to all of her people. And it's such a fascinating, effortless change, like change in motion.
Well, there's two. So because you and I have spoken, but I consider that impact to be 100% reliable and 98% unpredictable. Yeah. Right? It always happens, and I never know how it's going to happen. But the other, one of my other favorite Zen stories, this one is one of those mythical ones, is of the monastery where every morning and evening the monks had to do 10,000 prostrations to the north, to the east, to the south, to the west, and that takes a while. And one day the head monk is speaking to them and says, enlightenment, awakening, is really just a happy accident. And one kind of pissy monk raises his hand and goes, then why do we have to do all these prostrations every day? And the head monk goes, oh, to become more accident prone. And there is an element to which the more, for me at least, the more I listen, the more I look, the more I see, the more I am able to live in this deeper feeling, the more accident prone I become, the more cool, inexplicable stuff seems to happen around me. And I kind of love living that way. I've heard you, Joe, talk about it as a magic carpet ride.
I was just gonna bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, please do, because I love your magic.
Well, I'm right between you and Nikon on my computer. Nikon loved that story, and when I was interviewed by him a few weeks, I told that, and that's what it feels like to me, because my whole life. I was a striver, overachiever, you know, reading thousands of books, going to workshops, meetings, meditating, you name it, just really on the search. And I thought that was a good thing. That was the way my dad was. That was the way my family was. If you don't work hard and grunt through it, you're not going to get anywhere in life. And when I met Sid, I kind of entered a mystical universe, is the only way I can put it. It feels like I'm not making it happen. I'm following it. It feels, it's like a magic carpet. It doesn't have a steering wheel.
Yeah.
And I often say it's kind of like because we think we're in control, we think we have something to do with it. We're like the little kitty in the kitty car seat, you know, that's not connected to the wheels in the car, but thinks he's turning the car, you know. I was kind of like that. And in spite of that striving, I still had some impact with people. But when I got out of control and I really, in the truest sense, trusted this deeper intelligence we call universal mind, call it God, call it the creator, call it whatever you want, but there's an intelligence that we're all little parts of. And when we get out of the way, with our thinking gets out of the way, the fear, anxiety, over preparing, etc., something moves through us. It's like a moving through. And when that feeling, that energy is moving through us, it's tailor-made for whoever we're talking to or whatever we're doing, whether we're skiing down a slope in Lake Tahoe, which we wouldn't be doing today, or we're giving a talk to 1,000 people, or working with an alcoholic, or whatever we're doing. Mind knows exactly how to respond, that universal intelligence. And the more that I catch myself not trusting it, I awake more quickly to just, oh yeah, it's fine. It's all good. And that's when magic happens. That is the magic carpet knows where it's going. That's not our job. We will be with the right person at the right time. There is a universality and a oneness to that intelligence that we're all fortunate to be a part of. And we just have to get out of the way. And that's the ego, of course, is the ego, the part that thinks they're still running the show. But that's changed my life. And the way I put it when I started to see this is I started feeling more and more comfortable in my own skin. My temple felt really peaceful more and more of the time. And when it didn't, I knew I had grabbed the wheel again. That was recognizing my thinking in the moment. Just allowed me to let go. So it's people who have a spiritual awakening, that experience is the experience of that oneness. And in one split second, you can have that experience, and it transforms the way you relate to life. So that's really good news, because we have a lot of problems in our world, a lot of tragedies. I don't need to enumerate them again, because you just turn on CNN or your favorite TV station, and you'll hear them all. Everything is breaking news. And there's a lot to think about. But as each person wakes up on this planet to who they really are, it has a rippling effect. And Michael, working with companies, our next talk here is going to be with teachers and administrators in school systems in Canada and Florida, the US, different parts of the country, who brought the 3 principles into teacher education and into the classroom, and how that can change the entire learning environment for students. Learning disabilities go away. Discipline problems go down because the state of mind of the teacher is transformed. So this This has implications infinite.
But it's one of the things I love about the title of your book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane, at least as I remember the title of your book.
That you got it. You got it.
Okay, this is good. It is, as a metaphor, it is much more accurate than anything that says, hey, we can make problems go away if we believe hard enough or work hard enough. There will always be hurricanes, but there is always a calm in the center of the storm. And if we can find the calm, if we can live from the calm, if we can thrive in the calm, we don't have to fear the storms. And life is very different when you don't fear the storms. Life is very different when you don't have to pray for only good weather. And if there's stuff to be done, you're just always going to do it better from the eye of the storm than if you're caught up in the storm. And so I just think it's a perfect metaphor for what's possible, as opposed to some idealistic fantasy where life is beautiful all the time and blah, 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 blah.
They'll often interview people at a hurricane or after a tornado and how it brought the whole community together, and it got things in perspective. They lost all their possessions, but they still have their family or whatever. And you see this resilience pop up during storms, during tragedies. And it shows just how resilient people really are. Dan's had his hand up there for a while.
Hey guys, hey Joe.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you both and just being able to hear a conversation. I think especially in this time, but I wanted to say what an impact both of you have had on my life. And Michael, Inside Out Revolution, kind of introduced me to the Three Principles family. And through that, I've gotten to meet Joe. I've gotten to coach with Barb Patterson and Win Morgan. And just you having these little conversations are impacting the world in such a way. And I know it's helped in my marriage and my relationships and my leadership and everything. So I just wanted to share that. And I'm so appreciative of you both in showing up how you do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Anybody else have a?
Well, I think we never actually got to Nikon's question.
Yeah.
Oh,
we kind of waxed rhapsodic on his.
Nikon, yeah.
It's okay.
Don't take it
I
personally.
thoroughly enjoyed that riff. Like I love the riffs. So now that I have the both of you, I wanted to ask about suicidal ideation, because I think that's something, if I'm honest, I've dealt with most of my life, like a lot of it, and it comes and it goes. And sometimes when it's a lot, I get scared. And through this work, I've learned to be less afraid of it and more curious, and the curious has turned into fascinated. And then I read something recently that made me think, I'm gonna ask Dr. Joe, I'm gonna ask Joe and Michael about this. And the quote said something to the effect of, surrender is asking us to die to ourselves. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe my suicidal ideation is actually asking for ego death and not physical death. Like, oh, I need to ask the big guys about this, because it was one of those feelings where like it was something, you know what I mean? It was like, wait a minute, like there's a hint of gold in my little basket of like shimmering sand. So I'd like to ask you about that, because I'm not sure what I saw, but I think I saw something.
I mean, at the risk of preempting Dr. Joe, I think you saw exactly what you needed to see. Like, it doesn't matter what either of us think. No offense, but it's like, this is an individual insight-driven evolution. It doesn't have to look the same to everybody. Like, stuff comes to me. See, I think wisdom speaks to us in the language we understand. So it tends to speak to me in dark comedy. Like, because I speak dark comedy. It speaks to other people quite logically. It comes up for other people in pure feeling. And I think to try and pin it down or find out what it really means is missing the point. You saw something that brought forth the peace inside you. Stay with that. Yeah. That would be my 2 cents.
That's really refreshing. And it's a good reminder too, because I think, because I'm like Joe, I'm like striver all my life, hustle. And it's almost like the harder I try to hold on to the steering wheel, the louder the suicidal ideation gets. And I think I'm just making that connection. I'm like, oh, maybe this is my blow dryer switch that you talk about. It's like you're holding on too hard to the steering wheel. You should let go. Like,
Yeah. That's your little tap on the shoulder. Like,
I wish it was less scary. It was like, let go. Now it's like kill yourself, like, but not self, but like this metaphorical stuff. I'm like, okay, that's deep. Thanks, mine. Like,
There's an old teaching story about a college roommate. College kid wakes up with a bucket of ice water on his head, and he's like, oh! And his roommate's standing over him, and he goes, "What did you do?" And he said, "You told me to wake you. You didn't want to miss your exams." He said, "Yeah, but I didn't mean with a bucket of ice water." And he said, "Well, I called your name. I tried shaking you. I mean, and I think that's the thing is if we don't listen, it gets louder.
Yeah.
But it still got the same positive intention. And if you start to notice it before you get all the way to suicidal ideation, that'll be fun. But at least it's gonna wake you up.
Just a quick story. I saw a client last week for the first time, and he's extremely distressed and very obsessive compulsive in his thinking, just really very distraught, very skeptical of the 3 principles. Does this really work, or doesn't it? I think I have to just go to AA, and they told me to only AA, and he was really nervous, and so I sent him a copy of my new book, Thriving in the. I said, why don't you just read a little bit and see if this makes any sense to you? And and then he canceled. He's never coming back, and then I get a call from him 2 days ago, and he said, I've changed my mind. I think I'm all in after reading your book, just the first 100 pages. And so I saw him yesterday. All I had to do was see his face, and it had changed. There was the strain and mental illness. It just covers every pore of your being. And it wasn't gone, but it was like a bright light coming out of his eyes. And he says, I don't know what it was about, but I feel hopeful. And I said, that's it. Just, you can have an insight and not understand your insight, and you change. And if you try to figure out your insight, it might go away. The feeling might go away. But if you just let it rest, just hold it gently, that insight will transform you. It's your divine intelligence doing the heavy lifting. And we always, from the ego, we think we have to improve ourselves. We have to change our thinking. We have to develop better habits, and it isn't that at all. It's really getting out of the way, riding the magic carpet ride, whatever metaphor you want to use. I see Kelly's got her hand up there.
well, thank you very much. That's a whole new way of thinking about suicidal ideation. Done.
That was your thought. You did it.
No, thanks you guys.
We just validated it.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Nikon. The unfoldment is always great. Joe, it's great to see you again. Lovely to be
Kelly.
here. And Michael, this is the first time for me, so I'm really excited to connect and see you in our Hollywood squares here. Well, first I want to say just how profound this work has been and how timely it is for the world, and I'm just so glad to be a part of it. And I came to it 6 years ago, Michael, with a recording coming home from Joshua Tree, California. My girlfriend plunked you in, and we began to listen to the story, the movie of the mind, with the actor who had the heart attack. And I was in, and I kept listening since then. And then, of course, I've found other wonderful people in this field, such as Joe. And what my question is this: Joe, you spoke to a place where, you know, you just are you get more settled in yourself, and you just become, my words, peaceful or calmer. And so what I'm noticing is that I run a room and I offer these conversations for people, and I often am so out of myself. You know, whether it's with getting people in, or they're texting or emailing, or they're, and then I'm the moderator and the host. So, you know, that usually it starts with them speaking, just like you guys did. But I find myself in a place that's out of, like, not out of body, but literally like, okay, where are we in the conversation? I just noticed that person, you know, needs to get in, and then there comes the space where there's, you know, a moment of question, and it's like, not really sure where we are. Should I just tell everybody that? Like, am I just going to say, like, sorry guys, I left the room? But I really feel a sense of unrest with it all. And so I'm curious, you guys have been running rooms for years, working with people in the live audience forum. This is, I didn't sign up to be a host. It was wisdom telling me that this is what I needed to do. So I don't know, what would you suggest, or what do you have for me?
Who wants to go first?
Oh, I was gonna defer to you this time. I mean,
Okay, well,
sort of monopolizing things, but I guess I'm the guest, so I'm allowed to. But let's.
The more I think of myself as a host, or as a therapist, or as a teacher, the more I get in my own way. That brings all these thoughts about what that means, or what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing, and so you start. It's like you're driving with the parking brake on. Yeah. You're trying to move forward, but you've got a resistance. You're scattered in your intention, and so. For me, over time, you know, because I felt the same way as you when I first started, Kelly. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea how to do this therapy. I had no idea how to teach this to therapists. I had no idea how to work with corporations. And every time I would do something I'd never done before, I get that same feeling of anxiety and self-doubt, and how did I get here? You know, I don't belong here. You know, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And then, but it always comes to me, you're enough. Like I said earlier, you know, just be yourself, and that'll take care of it. And I remember a few years ago, Keith Blevins and I were asked to work with all the department chairs at the Mayo Clinic and teach these principles for 4 days to them and their wives. And they're all like from Oxford and Harvard and Yale. And here I have a master's degree in psychology. Who am I, you know? And I was really intimidated and didn't sleep much the night before. I was really nervous, and so was Keith. And, but when I got in front of the group, it was interesting how it changed. Kind of like with you with Nikon, the suicidal thoughts. The most obnoxious surgeon was in the room, stood up and started screaming at us. This is a bunch of bullshit. Where's the 3-ring binders? What are you going to teach us to do? And he was just in our face. And it was at that moment, it forced me into the present. And I don't even know what I said, but I said, let me just talk to the guy, Keith. And I just walked up to him, and I don't even know what I said, but it was, I forgot for a moment I was teaching to all of these learned intellectual geniuses. And I just was person to person. And that interaction turned the group. It turned the group. I have no idea what I said. I have no idea what came out of my mouth. And you'll just see this deeper and deeper, Kelly, that you'll know you can trust that your wisdom knows way more than your pea brain. It'll shock and surprise you what comes out your mouth, and you will learn from what you say. I learn more as a therapist than I think my clients do many days. You know, I'm sure all of you who are helpers, when you drop into that feeling, things will just come out of you, and the client, wow, I've never heard that before. Or, you know, maybe you've said it 20 times, but you said it from a place and they were receptive, and it works. It changes a person. So the only thing that's changed for me since I learned this 40 some years ago, meeting Sid, is I just have much more absolute faith in the magic carpet. I know it's not going to dump me.
It's funny because I've got such a similar story in terms of, when you seems like it's going to be the hardest person. So when my first book came out, I went on a very popular radio show in the UK to promote it. And the host, I'd actually got on the show because I'd helped a relative of his. And so he brought me on. And he was incredibly charming and had made me a cup of tea before we went on air. And then the red light comes on. And he goes, right, we're here with Michael Neill. He's another one of these shiny-toothed Americans here to tell us how we should live. Michael, why should anyone listen to a single word you have to say? And it was so like, that I just burst out laughing. And I said to him, hey, I am not on a mission from God. I've learned some things in my life and work that seem to help a lot of people. And if you'd like me to share them with your listeners, I'm in. But if not, the didgeridoo player you had on before me was great. And I'm sure he can do an encore. Well, like we wound up, he kept me on for the entire show. And my first book became a bestseller by the end of the week because of that one appearance.
Wow.
But it was that same thing. If you're not trying too hard to do something, you're just trying to really share what strikes you as being helpful to share from the deepest place you can find inside you, nothing bad happens. And sometimes really good things happen.
Yeah. I thank you both so much. I do believe that wisdom comes when it needs to come. I love the saying wisdom on demand. There's this place that I'd really like to just, they've stopped talking, press wisdom on demand. But yeah, it just doesn't work that way. But I get a lot from what you're saying, because what I'm hearing is that, it's all within me. It's all there. And I don't need to do anything. And maybe the truth is that when it's not there, that you wait until it is, even though there's silence, or maybe there's no question, or, I don't feel awkward in the silence. But Michael, you did say presence and practice. So I'll hold on to that.
And another thing is just being okay not knowing. Like, wow, I have no clue what to say right now. Something happens when you accept where you are. Don't you think, Michael? When you don't judge it and you just accept it, just opens you up again.
My wife and I were talking yesterday or the day before at lunch about what she thought was the most helpful problem in the world that I could solve with what I do. And I don't think that way normally. But when I was thinking about it, I said, I think if I could just help people not confuse uncertainty with stress, that would probably do more than any other thing I can think of in the world. Because the world is uncertain. But we've got that so locked into insecurity and stress and fear that sounds like a terrible thing. Once you know there's a magic carpet, uncertainty is the joy of the journey. That's why you get on the magic carpet, because you don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
But you know it's going to be an adventure, and you know it's going to turn out as well as it can.
We're up against the hour. We have one more question. Do we have time for one more?
I'm yours if we've got time.
Steve has a question. Unmute yourself, Steve.
Thank you. First of all, love you guys. Had the opportunity to read several of your books, and they're very, very good. As far as question, I'm sitting here listening, and my brain's going a little crazy, so the questions are changing pretty regularly. But I guess, for myself, I've been in a situation for the last few years, just going through something, going through a hurricane, sitting in the eye, and I don't know, maybe, and I missed the first part. I apologize. Maybe I missed something, but I don't know if there's anything to talk to with that regards, if that makes sense.
I'm not quite sure that it does. Can you just try and put it as a question?
Yeah. So how do you get out of your own way, I suppose? maybe that's the question. I'm a little struggling with it, to be honest. So,
I mean, the easiest thing that I know is to just know that if I can see that it's me in my own way, I'm already on my way out of it. Like, because I wouldn't notice that if I really was lost in it. When it looks like the world's in my way and they're in my way and what happened is in my way, then I've got a real problem. But it never is.
what if you see both?
Well,
I think it's I would say it's not just a noticing, it's a gentle noticing. There's something about being gentle with yourself that helps the transformation process. In my book, I talk about the process of transformation, that throughout your life, when you learn the principles before and after, you're still going through transformation, because that's our design. We're designed to transform into our true essence. And I still get stuck daily in my thinking. I have moments where I'm completely upset about something, but when I just notice it, as soon as I notice it, because my body tells me my heart rate goes up, or I look in the mirror as I walk by and I can see this look. As soon as I notice it and I don't judge it, just notice it, that's enough. It's like pushing the reset button on your computer. It gets you back to your default setting, which is resilience. So there's nothing to do, Steve. It's nothing to do. It's just a gentle noticing. Mind takes care of the rest of it. That's how I'd answer. But we're out of time, unfortunately. I wish we had more time, but thank you, Michael Neill, so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Steve. For writing this, you have to read the foreword to my book. If you don't read any of it, read the foreword. It's a beautifully written,
thank you.
Wonderful introduction to the book. So I thank you so much, Michael, for that and for today. And for those of you who are here, this will be recorded. And as all of the other podcasts that we've done, they're all recorded and they're all available on all the podcast, Spotify, etc., and YouTube. YouTube, we're getting a lot of people watching these on YouTube. So if you're not here in person, enjoy the hour. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Raise your hand if you weren't here. Just me and Kelly? Yeah, okay.
So next time we have a couple of people from Salt Spring Island, Barb Oust, who is the principal at Salt Spring Elementary, who's going to talk about her pioneering work with kids after meeting Sid Banks and how it changed her role as a principal. And Krista Campsell, who helped develop this curriculum called My Guide Inside. And we'll also have a social worker from Menominee, Wisconsin, who worked with Kathy Marshall for 20 years. They brought the 3 principles to the school district, and just lots of wonderful stories. And then also Brooke Wielden Reese is going to talk about the Spark program. The Spark Inside is her curriculum, and that's out of Tampa, Florida, but it's worldwide in every language you can imagine. So this is really getting out to the world of education. So next, do you know any teachers or people in education that would be interested? Pass it on, the word for our next one. So thank you all so much. Is there anything else I've forgotten to say, James?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if Neal, if Michael would sign my copy.
Here you go. It said with love. Just
Thank you. Also, just didn't want to forget Mary had her hand up and down. If you had a quick second, or if she.
No, it's time to end it. I had a little story that it's too long.
Okay.
It's a fun, positive story, but you guys don't get to hear it today.
Well, send it into the chat room and we'll post it.
Well, it's too long. You know me, Joe, trying to tell the story.
Hey,
Anyway.
You're talking the pot calling the kettle black here. That's
Yeah. Thank you. It's been beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
all right. Thank you all very
Thanks,
much.
guys. Nice to see you all.
All right. Unmute everybody. Can you do that, James? And everybody.
I think
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.